Long before DreamWorks Pictures glamorized the jungles of Madagascar, European and American explorers have been fascinated by this large island near the east coast of Africa. Many tales and legends have been brought back about its people and natural habitat, but there was one myth that had captured people's attention the most: the legend of the man-eating tree. In 1924, a former U.S. governor by the name of Chase Salmon Osborne wrote a book called Madagascar, Land of the Man-Eating Tree. According to Osborne, Madagascar has influenced many literary creations, including the Arabian Nights, Sinbad the Sailor, and even The Old Man and the Sea. Even Marco Polo was impressed with the island. As for the title of his book, Osborne admits that the reason he used this title was to ensnare our interest. I do not know whether this tigerish tree really exists, or whether the blood-curdling stories about it are pure myth. It is enough for my purpose if its story focuses your interest upon one of the least known spots of the world. So, does a man-eating tree really exist? Osborne has traveled to Madagascar many times himself, but admits that he has never seen such a tree. He keeps an open mind, though, and argues, why shouldn't such a specimen exist? There are, of course, insect-eating plants. Why can't there be a tree specimen that does the same, but instead of devouring insects, maybe something a little bigger? The missionaries that he had spoken to did not believe in it, but the native people were adamant that it exists. He also argues, interestingly, that even though the missionaries did not believe in it, they were also not quick to dismiss it, even though it is their, I quote, affair and responsibility to discredit and destroy anything that fosters demonism and idolatry, end quote. Osborne does leave us with a story, however, but it is not his. In 1878, a traveler by the name of Karl Liesch wrote a letter to a Polish doctor, Omelius Fredlowski. It was later published in many scientific journals at the time, and Osborne chose to transcribe this entire letter in his book. I will not read the entire letter, but a portion of it that contains a description of this mythical tree. If you can imagine a pineapple 8 feet high and thick in proportion, resting upon its base and denuded of leaves, you will have a good idea of the trunk of the tree, a dark dingy brown and apparently as hard as iron. From apex of this truncated cone, 8 leaves hung sheer to the ground, like doors swung back on their hinges. These leaves, which were joined at the top of the tree at regular intervals, were about 11 or 12 feet long, and shaped very much like the leaves of the American agave. These leaves, hanging thus, limp and ageless, dead green in color, had in appearance the massive strength of oak fiber. The apex of the cone was a round, white concave figure, like a smaller plate set within a larger one. This was a receptacle, and there exuded into it a clear, trickly liquid, honey-sweet and possessed of violent, intoxicating, and soporific properties. Off the undermost plate, a series of long, hairy green tendrils stretched out in every direction towards the horizon. These were 7 or 8 feet long. Carl Leish's narrative did not end with a mere description, however. He goes on to tell a fantastical tale of how his examination of the tree was interrupted by the shrieking natives and a subsequent sacrifice of a maiden. With still wilder shrieks and chants, they now surrounded one of the women and urged her with the points of their javelins until slowly and with despairing face she climbed up the stalk of the tree and stood on the summit of the cone, the palpi swirling all about her. "Drink! Drink!" cried the men. Stooping, she drank, rising instantly with wild frenzy in her face. The atrocious cannibal tree that had been so inert and dead came to sudden savage life. The slender, delicate palpi, with the fury of starved serpents, the tendrils, one after another, like green snakes, quivered a moment over her head, then as if instinct, with demonic intelligence, fastened upon her in sudden coils round and round her neck and arms. With brutal energy and infernal rapidity, wrapped her about in fold after fold, ever tightening with cruel swiftness and the savage tenacity of anacondas fastening upon their prey. Carl Leish then goes into gory details about the aftermath, dramatically describing the blood trickling down from the stalk of the great tree and the natives rushing forward to drink from it. Before he was rushed away by a colleague as the scene descended into madness and frenzy. He returned to the tree 10 days later to find a skull at the base of it as a reminder of the sacrifice that had been made. Well, this has been such a fantastical tale that one was inclined to believe that it was the work of a very creative imagination. And one would be right. I came across an online article by the New York Times stating that the Museum of Hoaxes website claimed that every detail in the story is in fact fictitious. Not just the tree, but both Carl Leish and Dr. Fredlowski do not exist either. The story was written by Edmund Spencer, a reporter for the New York World, not to be confused with Edmund Spencer, the 16th century poet. This reporter also had a reputation and a talent for writing fiction as well. Even though the story was a complete fabrication, it was somehow printed in a scientific publication. It was later confirmed a hoax, but somehow people chose to ignore this confirmation, and the original articles continued to be published and retold as facts. It is no secret that Victorian Britons had a fascination for the macabre. Imperialism gave them a thirst for exploration, but with this came an obsession of painting native people, especially those on the African continent, as exotic, savage, and even cannibalistic. And therefore the public were willing to believe the tale of the man-eating tree of Madagascar, even though it was never true. And some still believe it is true to this day.